What's up, everybody? I am your host, the leader of a centuries-old vampire cult who hates humans but loves their blood. And that is my co-host, a badass small-town sheriff whose hot wife made him sad. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today I thought with all of the snow and the ice storms going on that we should cover a really snowy horror movie. This movie is also, in my opinion, one of the best vampire movies ever made. I have always loved this movie. I love the vampires in it. They are so fucking savage and unique. Also, like, the cast is really good. You can't really go wrong with some Josh Hartnett.
Josh's hair in this he grew up. He doesn't have that cowlick sticking out in this. He put a beanie over it. It's too cold for the cowlick.
It's like he's finally a man in this movie. Like, he's not playing that like teenager or slacker guy that's also really smart.
That has the fucking standout cowlick. Like the only man to ever style a cowlick and that become part of his signature style. He tried to make cowlicks cool.
There's that really popular picture of him in Halloween H2O where he's like arguing with Jamie Lee Curtis and they're standing out in front of all these shops and his hair is a fucking mess and there's a barbershop right behind him. Yeah.
That's funny.
I think we need more Josh Hartnett movies lately. The only thing I have seen him in recently was that banger of a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, it seems like he kind of hung up the cleats. He retired. Yeah, early retirement. I mean, he's a big name, so I know he's not like having problems getting roles.
I don't know what happened to him. But yeah, he was fucking awesome in the Black Mirror episode, which was almost like a little movie itself because it was like 2 hours long.
Maybe he cut the cowlick and he can't get roles anymore.
Well,
which Black Mirror episode?
It's the space one.
The space one.
Yeah, where he wants to take over his buddy's body.
With Jesse Pink.
Jesse Pink, yeah.
Oh man, that is the best. I think the best Black Mirror episode there ever was. It's actually kind of a movie. It's an hour and a half long. It is so fucking grim. And if you haven't checked it out, definitely check out Black Mirror, the space episode. That's not the official name.
I don't remember what
There's probably more than one space episode. I think it was like the last season.
Well, it's the newest season, yeah.
Which is old now.
Like 2 years maybe.
Yeah, they had fallen off really bad. Great show, and then they had a really like awful season, and then they came back with, I think it was only like 4 episodes, but they were all an hour long, hour and a half. Yeah, that one's it's good shit, man.
So speaking of recent movies, thank you guys for checking out our Best of 2024 episode. We know that it's a little different than your kind of movie of the week thing you guys are used to getting, but we love doing those kinds of episodes. They're a lot of fun for us. We spend all year putting that episode together. It's just a little something fun and different, but the best part is we get to hear your guys' top 10, or some people did top 5s, and we even had one top 13, which I really like that idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I needed the top 13.
Yeah, shout out to Brandon for that really good idea.
Yeah,
I know you were hurting to squeeze it into a 10. So maybe like a.
We definitely I needed that. I needed the 13 plus the honorable mentions.
Plus 3 more. But yeah, thanks to you guys that talked movies with us all last week. It is one of the biggest benefits of this job is you have, hundreds of people that want to talk movies, and it's a good time.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. Another side of that too is the people who aren't maybe caught up on the movies of the year, or, maybe are not tracking like a lot of the independent stuff that comes out, and it gives them a really good direction. I know we got some of that too.
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons we do it. So, especially with independent, it's really hard to track what's worth checking out. I don't know, it's probably not the best way to say it. It's not what's worth checking out. It's kind of more the cream of the crop when there's so many independent things coming out.
And there's some bad ones. There is
yeah.
some bad ones though, and I think independent movies got a bad rap at some point. And although some of our greatest franchises came from independent films, but over the years, some people, kind of gave it rap as like B movies and things like that.
I
So
think stuff like the Evil Bong series for the
yeah,
bad rap.
exactly. And when some people see that, they don't know if it's the best of the best or if it's the worst of the worst, so they stay away. And it's hard because things like Rotten Tomatoes will give an awful, awful movie a super high rating, and really good movies bad ratings. And so it's a lot of times when I hear a movie's doing good and it's got like a super good Rotten Tomatoes rating, I'm like, oh, that could be hit or miss.
Yeah, that's true. Also, thanks to Ryan at EvilDeadBooks.com for hooking us up with the fucking coolest, most accurate Evil Dead Rise Necronomicon ever. I gotta post some pictures of this thing. It is beautiful. If you're looking to buy a screen accurate Evil Dead book, spend your money with Ryan. I just talked to him earlier and we are cooking up something super awesome for the remake.
Yeah, definitely excited about that. The book, I know we talked about it last week. The book is fucking incredible.
It is.
Like, it is the most screen accurate one I've seen. Anytime, like, the cover is always what catches your eyes, but a lot of the people who make them are just like notebooks or they're
Yeah.
blank pages. You don't realize until you really see it in person how much that, like, the aged pages, it's not even necessarily what's on the pages, that's awesome, but the aged pages themselves make the book look so much more like the movie.
Well, even like when I open the book and it like cracks and pops like a fucking actual 500,000-year-old book or whatever. That's part of it, man. That is like part of the experience of like I got a thing from this movie.
Yeah, it's big difference. There's two sitting next to me, and I never realized looking at that, the pages, just even with it closed, that clean version, and then looking up at one
Yeah.
that looks like, it's like the pages are like a map from the 1400s.
Yep.
Like it's good.
Yeah, so you can find him at evildeadbooks.com or his Etsy page at Rubberworks, which is all just one word, which we will put in the show notes as always. I believe he has a YouTube page as well that shows a little bit about how he makes the books.
He does.
Yeah. But like I was saying last week, we're going to do something cool with him here coming up. So with that being said, are you ready to jump into 30 Days of Night?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
Ready like Alaska in the winter.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to turn into ancient vampires that become bloodthirsty and eat your whole town, give us a review. 30 Days of Night is a 2007 American vampire horror film based on the comic book miniseries of the same name. The film was directed by David Slade and stars Josh Hartnett and Melissa George. The story focuses on an Alaskan town overtaken by vampires as it enters into a 30-day-long night period. It was written by Steve Niles, Stuart Biddle, and Brian Nelson. It was produced by Sam Raimi and Robert Tappert, who should sound familiar to most of you because those two guys did a little movie called The Evil Dead. We've circled back around to Evil Dead, and we haven't even got to the end of the episode yet. Yeah, so it was distributed by Sony Pictures, and it had a budget of $30 million and a box office of $75.5 million. So the idea of 30 Days of Night, it was originally a film. They wanted to sell it as a film. That didn't go well, so then they changed it to a comic, and then it changed back into a film. But it was ultimately rejected. So the creator, Steve Niles, he ended up shelving the whole idea until he eventually showed it to IDW Publishing. And IDW liked the idea, and they ultimately published the comic version of it. And the comic ended up being this big success. And because of this success, he began pitching it again as a film, and it eventually found its way to the hands of Sam Raimi, who liked the idea so much, mostly because the uniqueness of the vampires. He began working with Tapert on developing a mini-series of this story. So Raimi's interest in this started this bidding war between DreamWorks, MGM, and Senator International. And this bidding war started at $1 million. So in July of 2002, Senator International acquired the rights for 30 Days of Night in a 7-figure deal with Raimi and Tapert attached as producers. By October of 2002, Niles was working on adapting 30 Days of Night for the big screen. He began fleshing out the characters more significantly in this adaptation process. In February of 2003, Columbia Pictures partnered with Senator International to work on 30 Days of Night, which was developing under Senator International's newly established production company, Ghost House Pictures. The following May, Stuart Battle, one of the writers for Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, began rewriting Niles' 30 Days of Night's draft for production. Niles was pleased with Battle's faithfully rewritten script, which was submitted to the studio in October of 2004. So we're starting to see, it was like the original guy, he wrote like the first screenplay, and we're going to see that they kind of kept passing the screenplay on, and it would just be rewritten and rewritten.
It happens a lot.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. I mean, that's if you write comic books, that doesn't mean that the first time you sit down to write a screenplay, it's going to be on point, like A+, nothing needs to be changed. I mean, that's pretty rare.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Like, comics are nowhere near close to written in like story form. They're more bubbles talking back and forth. So I could definitely see that happens a lot. Like,
Yeah,
I was surprised, like when we covered Season of the Witch, to see that got passed through quite a few hands.
Yeah, it happens. It's no knock towards him. So in September of 2005, director David Slade was announced to have signed on to the movie. And in March of 2006, Slade revealed that screenwriter Brian Nelson, who wrote the screenplay for Slade's previous film, Hard Candy, which is a good movie, was writing a new draft of the 30 Days of Night script. So the director said that filming would begin in the summer of 2006 in Alaska and New Zealand. Now, I could not find where in Alaska this was supposedly filmed, but I did find that almost all of the movie is filmed in New Zealand, with most of the filming taking place in an area called Auckland. Also, the setting for the story is Barrow, Alaska, which is a real place. It's not called Barrow now. It has been renamed something that I would not dare try to pronounce. But it's past the Arctic Circle, located at the very tip top of the state of Alaska. And in reality, Barrow doesn't get 30 days of night. They actually get 65 to 67 days of night.
Ugh,
So
that's
yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
I love the nighttime, but yeah, you need some daylight at some point.
Yeah, I mean, as many of you guys know, I spent years in Alaska. I lived in about the middle of the state, and pretty much during the worst part of winter, we would get about 5 4.5, 5 hours of kind of daylight. And essentially, like, the sun would come up, probably somewhere around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then it would be pretty close to being set by 3 in the afternoon.
I would imagine with it that close on the horizon too, it never is like sunny outside. It just gets kind of dusk.
Yeah, it's never like a sunny day. It's kind of just overcast and, a little bit brighter than twilight, I would say. But yeah, lived that life for years. You get used to it, but we also never had just straight nighttime for, 2 months.
And the place where they shot this movie looks miserable.
Yeah.
Not only is it fucking snowing constantly, there's like 3 foot of snow at all times, but you look at some pictures of Alaska and you got these beautiful mountains covered in snow, and this is not this place. This place is like so far up there, everything has just
flat,
froze
yeah.
flat over millions of years, and it's just snow.
Yeah, I've been to the Arctic Circle, and there's like nothing up there, and this is past that. So I've never actually seen past that, but I imagine that there's not very much up there. I do know when I was there, kind of a lot of that part of Alaska is lived in by tribes, basically. Still, like
Very cold
just
people.
just natives that have grown up in these villages there, and that's they want to keep living that life, and essentially that's kind of who occupies a lot of that area.
Yeah, you got to have a certain thick skin to live in that, man.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be cold all the time.
So 30 Days a Night was released in 2,855 cinemas in the United States and Canada on October 19th, 2007. In its opening weekend, the film grossed 16 million ball hairs, placing first in the box office. The film grossed $39.7 million in the United States and Canada and $35.7 million overseas for a grand total $75.3 million worldwide. 30 Days a Night was released February 26th of 2008 on DVD, Blu-ray, and what the fuck is UMD? It says for PlayStation Portable, UMD. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't even know what a PlayStation Portable is.
Well, they had the
Is that a PSP?
PSP.
Is that what the PSP means? PlayStation Portable?
Yeah, PSP was a PlayStation Portable.
Did not know that.
But I never knew that they had movies.
They did.
Because remember, those were like little discs in a case.
Little baby discs, yeah. But yeah, it was released on PlayStation Portable, apparently. The videos sold over 1.3 million copies, making over $26 million total for just the home video release. A prequel miniseries, Blood Trials, was released in 2007. A sequel miniseries, Dust to Dust, was released in 2008. And a straight-to-DVD sequel entitled Dark Days was released on October 5th of 2010. The script for the sequel was written by Steve Niles, who, remember, he wrote the original comic book. So when filming began on October 20th of 2009, Reyes Caro and Maya Krushner was named as leads, with Krushner playing the lead vampire villain Lilith. 3 days after filming began, Niles revealed that Kaylee Sanchez replaced Melissa George in the role of Stella Olson. The sequel was produced on a lower budget, but being straight to video allowed the writers to more closely follow the comic book. I'm guessing that after this story, Stella maybe goes after the vampires. I've never seen the sequel, didn't know it existed. I do know that the prequels that I talked about, Dust to Dust and Blood Trials, I believe they're kind of more in possibly the anime kind of style.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not 100% sure. I do know it's animated. I've seen a very short clip of it, but it looked like it was kind of more anime looking.
Yeah, I had no idea that there was a sequel to this in any way.
Yeah, I didn't either. So ratings. Rotten Tom gave it a pretty rough 50%. IMDb gave it a 6.6 out of 10. Letterboxd a 3.1 out of 5. And the Google average audience rating is a 4.2 out of 5.
Wow.
Yeah, up there.
Google really likes it.
If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming for free on Pluto TV and available to rent on Amazon, Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube, and Fandango for about $3.50.
That's not many ball hairs.
No, it's on 3.5 ball hairs. All right. You ready to talk about the plot of 30 Days of Night?
Yeah, I'm
All right.
ready. This movie is just to put this out there before we jump in. So I remember when this movie came out, I was a kid, and I specifically remember just not being able to get into it, just being kind of bored.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, as we've discussed many times on this show, you're dumb when you're a kid. So I was really interested going into it this time because I have not seen it since. So it's been a long time.
This was one of the movies that burned into my brain when I first seen it because I like the vampires so much, and we don't get a ton of horror movies in the snow. So I've always been into this movie. I mean, it's not on my list of favorite movies, but yeah, I've always enjoyed it.
That can be dangerous judging a movie, though, because how many movies have we done where it's like, it was such like something we'd seen when we were younger, and then it was kind of a letdown going back to it. 13 goes. And, you still love those movies because they're part of your childhood, but...
Well, this one is a little different because I, of course, watched it many times living in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. I would say I probably watched it if I would average it out, I watched it like once a year for the about 4 years I was there. But yeah, I mean, as soon as I found out I was getting stationed in Alaska, my first thought was like, okay, when I get settled, definitely watch 30 Days a Night.
I love the premise. The premise of it, like movie aside, anything else, we'll get into all that. The premise of the story, I'm surprised hadn't been done before.
It
seems so obvious, but I guess it wasn't. At least it wasn't done on a huge scale.
It does have a very unique thing with it, but one thing I never noticed that I ended up actually coming up with in my research, which is at the very end of this episode, is this story is not quite as unique as I originally thought.
Well, I could believe that, because like I said, it seems obvious. Vampires can't be in the daylight. Alaska's like the one place that literally will have 30 days, or in real life, up to 60 days of straight darkness. Seems like a vampire haven.
Well, yeah, there's some things really unique that this movie does that I will agree, with everything you said. But then there is some other stuff where I'm going to name off something that a lot of people know about, and you're going to go, oh, yeah, because it went right over my head until it actually had to be pointed out to me, and then I was like, okay, yeah, but we'll get to that. So we start off by getting some info on the location of our story here. This takes place in Barrow, Alaska, which is isolated in 80 miles of roadless wilderness. And the people that live there are cut off every winter for 30 days of night. We then get a shot of a very dirty, unclean looking man who has just arrived on land after using a rowboat to get from this big abandoned ship off the coast. It's like in the water off the coast, and I'm pretty sure it's abandoned. It looked abandoned to me. I think that's where these vampires are living, is on this boat.
Yeah, that's definitely where they come from. But I feel like that this part of the year, that shit would be froze up.
I would agree with that. So this guy, he's going to be somewhat important in the beginning of the film, and he is only known as the Stranger. He does not have a name.
He's a dirty-ass stranger.
Dirty, yeah. We then see this man walk through miles of snow and ice before he finally arrives on the outskirts of Barrow. And once he arrives, we get some text on the screen that informs us that this is the last day of sunlight before the 30 days of night. We then meet our main character and the sheriff of Barrow, Eben Olsen, and he is standing there with his deputy, Billy Kitka. And they are investigating a kind of odd crime that was reported which is a pile of burned and melted satellite phones. Which at first, Billy blames on, those damn pesky teenagers, because, they're always up to no good. But Eben shoots this down, saying that they would have left a note saying, like, fuck you to the adults or something. On their way back into town, we see them stop at the Welcome to Borrow sign, where Billy changes the population numbers from 563 to 152, because the vast majority of citizens say fuck that shit, and they head further down south so they don't have to live a month in cold, dark night.
That seemed crazy to me. Like, that was a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't think, essentially, I don't know, 3/4 of the town would leave.
Well,
Or, I mean, I get, like, not having daylight sucks, but for that to be vacation time for 75% of the town, like, it would be a town like this, too, probably not a huge, wealthy people who can, wealthy population who can take a break like that once a year, just go on vacation for a week.
yeah, I mean, I guess I could kind of see it, because when I was in Alaska, there was, a chunk of the population that would maybe live there, at least 6, 7 months out of the year, but they would, because everything gets so cold, some jobs don't even exist once it gets so cold,
Yeah, I get that. I mean, there's a lot of old people who travel around and they live 6 months in one area and then they head down south for the winter. But this seems like everybody just takes the whole 30-day vacation.
Yeah. Another thing, it seems odd to us, but then at the same time, having a whole month of no sunlight is also extremely odd. So,
Well, living in a place like that's so hard to get to is also weird. I was watching, I don't remember if it was a show or a YouTube video or what, but them having to literally fly stuff in like food for the winter because the water would freeze over. So after a certain point, you couldn't use boat. The planes couldn't fly at a certain point. So you essentially had to stock up. And this town kind of seems like one of those places.
So another important detail we see here is Eben has asthma, and he has to continually use his inhaler, which will come into play a few times throughout the story. So next we jump on over to Barrow, where we meet another one of our main characters, an Alaskan fire marshal named Stella Olson. And the reason that her name might sound familiar is because she was married to Sheriff Eben Olson. They were together for a long time, and according to the townspeople, they were very happy, but somewhat recently, for reasons no one knows, they split up. Stella suddenly left Eben and moved to another town where she took a job with the state as the fire marshal. She has arrived back in Barrow for today only because her boss wanted her to do some fire safety inspections at some of the businesses there before this 30 days of night kicked off. And another important aspect of this situation is she didn't bother to tell Eben that she was in town.
Yep. Yeah, what he does I think is savage, but I don't blame him. I'd be pretty
I get
upset. Like, you call me when you need me, but
well, especially when we dive into this story, their story, just their relationship a little more, you really feel for Eben.
Another super important aspect to their whole relationship, she's hot as fuck. I just got to put that out there.
I am a sucker for those, it kind of sounds fucked up, but like the girls with like the rabbit teeth, like the front teeth are a little.
Damn, I didn't get rabbit teeth.
Nah, man, it's like a thing, man, because like Samara Weaving has it. Like,
oh, I know how you feel about her.
She's got that super cute smile. Them two front teeth are a little bigger than the average person, but it's super cute.
We didn't get into how in Azrael, which I thought was going to make your list, but she plays literally the same exact character that she plays in Ready or Not. Like,
I was fine with it.
Like, she has been typecast so specific. I mean, I feel like you could have just taken her to a different setting.
She
and
dies in Scream 6.
same role.
She didn't. She was a victim in Scream 6. So obviously, it's not all the movies, but I love her.
Well, I tell you this, I think that Melissa George is better looking significantly than Samara Weaving.
Oh no. Well, we'll move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta put that out there.
So next up, we get a quick scene of an unknown person using a hunting knife to butcher everyone's sled dogs. This is very important because during my time in Alaska, I discovered that sled dogs are not just a thing of the past. In some areas, mostly remote, people still use sled dogs as a means for transportation. A lot of people will either use dogs or a snow machine, which we down here in the lower 48 call a snowmobile. But do not call it a snowmobile in Alaska because they will fucking ring you out for it. It's a snow machine.
That is a very strange thing to get offended over.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. If you got the money, I think the machines are probably a little better than the dogs. But this is another example here of dogs dying in horror movies. It's such a common thing in horror that I never noticed.
So this movie in ways reminds me of one of my favorite movies, The Thing. That is another movie where the sled dogs are brutally murdered in the beginning.
So yeah, I'll touch on that a little later on, but I will say cinematography, feel wise, as the way it was kind of shot, the feel, the color palette, that dark blue, like the dark blues and white color palettes, definitely got The Thing written all over.
Yeah, and I think that's another huge attraction for me in this movie. There's a lot of things that with this movie that kind of ties me to it, which is the whole like Alaska, The Thing, the vampires are, super unique. There's a lot of things that really draw me in with this movie. But so far we've seen someone destroy the satellite phones and now the sled dogs. So pretty much communication and transportation. So while driving through town, going to drop Billy off, Eben stops to talk to another townsfolk who is working on his snowplow. And this guy's name is Bo Brower. And he's kind of this like gruff, salt of the earth, get shit done kind of dude.
Bro, it's Elvis. It's Elvis from Sons of Anarchy, Bobby.
Yeah. Same actor. But he's kind of your average like white Alaskan guy.
Like he plays in Sons of Anarchy.
But the Alaska version.
Same guy.
Yeah, he traded in his motorcycle for a snow machine. So Eben gives him a ticket because the plow is leaking oil in the street, which he's like pissed off over. And once Eben gets back in the truck, Billy says, Bo's a pretty good guy. Like, why did you write him that dumb ticket? And Eben responds with the fact that he only writes him tickets because Bo kind of lives out on the edge of town, like all alone. And by writing him tickets, it makes him feel like a part of the town. Like he's, not just by himself. He's a part of this community.
And the town probably needs the money because 3/4 of them disappeared for the month.
Yeah. So next we hop on over to Stella, who is madly driving her ass off out in the middle of nowhere, trying to make it in time to catch the last plane out of Barrow. Because once it gets dark, no more planes come in or out until the 30 days of night are over. So this is like her only chance to get back home. But unfortunately for Stella, she gets T-boned by a big-ass like snow chainsaw thing, who apparently didn't see her as like the snowbanks were high and the brakes get stuck or whatever. But
these two managed to wreck in the middle of nowhere where they're the only two people on the road in probably a 300 square mile radius.
So the driver gets out and he checks on her. Of course, they know each other. It's a small town. And he starts apologizing and explaining what happened. But she doesn't have time for all that shit because she needs to get on that plane. She then uses her cell phone to call Eben to ask for a lift for the rest of the way. And Eben is not too happy to find out that she was in town and didn't bother to tell him. We don't know exactly why they split up, but we can tell that it wasn't Eben who wanted to call it quits. This is purely Stella, and Eben has tried talking to her about it, but she's totally like avoiding him on the issue. And it's even more shitty that she tells him like, we can finally talk about this if you give me a ride to the airport.
Yeah, it's the way the conversation unfolded too, with him being like, "Well, you're in town and you didn't even want to talk to me," and she's like, "Well, we can talk when you pick me up."
Yeah.
So he does a savage king move here, and he sends his partner.
Yeah. So he's like, fuck that. He tells her he's got to go check out this crime scene where these dogs got killed, and he's going to send Billy to give her a ride. But once again, unfortunately for Stella, Billy arrives too late to get her to the airport on time, and she misses the last flight out. And one thing that becomes apparent here is that Billy most certainly did this on purpose, because a lot of the townspeople really want Eben and Stella to get back together, and they think that if Stella is stuck here for a month, her and Eben will finally have time to work this out.
Yeah, that's probably not a very good thinking. Like, two people split up. The way of fixing it is not shoving them in a place where they can't leave for 30 days. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because it seems like they want to be together.
well, there seems like he wants to be with her, but I think at this point in the movie, she is still very much not really doesn't really have any interest. I mean, she literally came to town and didn't even call him.
So we then jump on over to the police station where we see Eben arrive after looking at the dead dogs. And this is important because we find out that Eben's 15-year-old brother Jake and their grandmother both help Eben out by working at the sheriff's station. And as he walks in, his grandma hands him a report that she wrote informing him that there has also been some vandalism at the Utilitor, which is basically like the power station for the town. And this information puts Eben on alert. So satellite phones are gone, sled dogs are gone, no more planes, and now the town's power source is being fucked with.
Well, this is probably the busiest he's ever been.
Yeah, no wonder he's on edge because, this amount of stuff probably takes a year for him to happen, and it's happening within a span of like 4 or 5 hours. So Evan drives out where he drives out to where he meets the station manager Carter. Now, what I found interesting is when he meets Carter, one thing that they say here is, I think it's Eben says it's got to be 10 below out here. 10 below is nothing in Alaska. Like that's really not a big deal there. People start kind of saying stuff like that, freaking out when you're talking 30, 40, 50 below. But 10 below is super average. I would go out and smoke, 10 below.
I would think that this high up in the Arctic Circle, especially considering that it's the last day of daylight left, the days have been probably about 4 or 5 hours leading up to this. It would probably be cold as fuck there. Like -10 would be probably warm to what they're used to at this point.
Yeah. That's like -10, not a big deal in Alaska.
I don't know what that is Celsius.
Yeah, I mean Alaska is it's a really dry cold too, so it's a lot easier to deal with. I mean, shit, I've been on the phone with you standing outside in a hoodie at 10 below. Like, not as bad as you would think. So when Eben walks in, he sees Carter's workstation and he comments on when Carter's wife and kids are finally going to come up to borrow. And Carter kind of shrugs this off, saying that they will come when they are ready. And this comes back later, which is why I mention it. So Eben then asks, like, what's up? And they are then joined by another man named Wilson. And they show Eben what they found in this pile of junk that was about to be destroyed by this, like, big shredder thing they have. It's basically a bunch of Wilson's helicopter parts, which he keeps his helicopter locked up during the winter. And needless to say, he's pissed. Because once they found this, like, he goes out to check on the helicopter, and he finds that someone has now completely destroyed this helicopter.
Yeah, at this point now, you're not looking at like a bunch of teenagers or something.
No.
Like if somebody is dismantling half of your helicopter, it's somebody who has some mechanical knowledge.
Yeah. So while Eben ponders this new information, we jump on over to the telecommunications station, which handles the phones and internet. where we then see the power suddenly shut off and the worker puts on like all his snow gear and he goes out to investigate. And while he is out there, he sees what looks like a black shadow quickly run past him. He then stops in his tracks and begins to look around with his flashlight when suddenly he gets surrounded by a bunch of these fast-moving black shadows. He tries to call out to them, telling them to stop, but when they see that, we then see that one of these creatures like slashes his neck as it runs by, and as the blood begins to spill out, another one tackles him to the ground and begins to feed, because we now know that this is a group of vicious vampires. And obviously, we're starting to see that their plan is to eat the people in this town.
Yeah, this is the first death, and I have to say, unfortunately, I fucking hated the way this was shot. All the like flash frames and the really like shaky camera angles, and this happens quite a bit later on in the movie too, but you hear me complain about this with how a lot of paranormal movies do this now, where they'll have 7 different camera angles and they're flashing back and forth between them, and they get really shaky, and it is really fucking hard to discern what the fuck is going on a lot of times.
Well, I mean, this movie's definitely not scared to kill people. So I almost wonder if that choice was they didn't want to give it all away right now, but they did want to kill earlier in the movie.
Well, I know that this is also a way to cover up sometimes practical effect that's not done that great, but in this case, there's not practical effects, so maybe the lack thereof practical
Yeah,
effect.
maybe.
But I think this goes beyond that, which I'll talk about a little bit later on with the director. But I mean, it gets crazy. Like, I feel like if you're epileptic, you may have a seizure.
So after this, we head on over to the local diner where we see the stranger from the beginning sitting at the counter, and he tries to order some alcohol, but the waitress tells him that alcohol is illegal during the 30 days of night. So he's like, okay, well then just bring me a bowl of raw meat. And she's like, motherfucker, like this is Northern Alaska. Like we don't have any fresh hamburger meat here. Like you either get frozen or burnt. Like those are your 2 choices. And he gets pissed and he freaks out over this. And before things get too carried away, Eben walks in and intervenes. And considering that Barrow doesn't get many strangers that just mysteriously show up right before this 30 days of night, he is suspicious of this guy, and he definitely assumes that he is the one doing all this shit that Eben keeps getting calls about. So Eben attempts to calm the man down and take him outside to chat, but the man isn't having it and basically challenges Eben to make him leave. But as he stands face to face with Eben, Stella puts her gun to the back of the man's head, essentially saying, checkmate, bitch. She's got him. Like, he's fucked.
And Eben is, once again, deep in love.
I would be too.
You know, if she would have had to shoot this guy, more than likely, depending unless she had a really small caliber, she would have shot him too.
Well, I think she was going into it hoping the gun would be enough. So Eben then arrests the stranger and begins to take him to jail for all the vandalism, and Stella asks to come with him in order to say hi to his brother and grandmother. We then jump on over to the oil production plant where we see 3 pipeline workers just getting off work. We have 2 men and 1 woman, and they are all talking about meeting up at one of the other's houses to do a little partying and maybe a little threesome action. If you ask me, definitely sounds like this was heading into threesome territory.
There's not much to do around this town, especially not this time of year.
Yeah, I don't blame them. But unfortunately for them, vampires are anti-premarital sex because right as they are deciding where to go, one of the men suddenly gets snatched away by another one of these black shadows.
And it's a twosome again.
It's back to just regular old plain sex. At first, the other 2 pipeline workers are confused about what just happened. But right as they start to go investigate this dark area of the factory, the man's bloody body drops from above, revealing a very nasty neck wound. Back over at the sheriff's station, Eben attempts to talk to the stranger, who literally has Art the Clown teeth. They're so fucking gross. But the guy refuses to answer any questions, and Eben's like, fine, you're going to sit in that cell for the next 30 days anyway. Eben discovers a bag of weed in a desk drawer, which I just want to point out, I'm no weed specialist, but that did not look like weed, like, at all.
Yeah, this was, what year was this? Like
2007.
7?
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have weed legal anywhere, I guess, then, but they could have did better than this.
It looks like black twigs and stuff in a bag. It doesn't.
It's the best weed you can get in this part of Alaska.
Yeah, maybe.
By the time it gets from Mexico all the way up to Alaska, that's all that's left. It's just sticks and seeds.
Yeah, it's crazy, man, because weed stores, legal weed stores are everywhere in Alaska. Like, they are literally like gas stations.
Yeah, 10 years changes things.
Yeah, it's totally legal there. It's interesting. But Evan calls Jake over and asks him, like, what the fuck is this? And Jake informs him that Grandma has been growing her own weed at home because she has cancer. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe she's just not good at growing weed.
Grandma is blazing the fuck.
Yep.
Some reefer a day keeps the reaper away from her old ass.
Yep.
You think if this was a Friday the 13th, she'd already be dead?
Oh, yeah. She would have been dead as soon as she planted that weed.
Yeah. It's like, there may not be any premarital sex. I pray to God
Except for with the pipeline work.
But there is some pipe
Some
smoking,
drugs.
and there is some other pipe smoking going on here.
So this scene is also important because this is where they discover that the internet and phones are also now down. And the stranger over in the cell, he perks up when he hears this. He then tells everyone that they are so helpless to what is coming for them, and that this time they are going to take him with them for all that he has done for them. So basically, what we have here is the stranger is kind of like the Renfield to these vampires. He is the human that they use to like go out during the day and start like sabotaging communication systems and stuff in preparation for the vampire's arrival later that night. Also, this guy is played by an actor named Ben Foster, who is unbelievably talented, really good actor. And even though he does like a really good job in this movie, I do think that he is very underutilized for his skill level in this movie. He's been in a ton of other movies. He was a main character in Lone Survivor. He was Alpha Dog. But one of my absolute favorite like non-horror movies is a movie called Hell or High Water. He is a main character in that. Fucking kills it. 5-star movie. Go check that out.
He's been in some bangers, man. Yeah. Alpha Dog, that's one of my favorite non-horror movies. Like, that's one.
He plays the older brother.
Every time it's on, man, I get sucked into it.
Yeah, and remember how good his acting was in that? Like when he's like freaking the fuck out on that phone and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben Foster is a really good actor, and I wish he'd had a bigger role in this. So right after this, Eben asked him who they are, but before the stranger answers, we see the town electricity shut off. So now their only source of energy is generators, which becomes very important because without power, everyone will eventually freeze to death. And I doubt everyone has enough fuel to last like 30 days.
So we also discover that, I'm taking a wild guess, you lived in Alaska, but a Jenny, is that Alaskan slang for a generator?
It most certainly is,
Will they get pissed if you call it a generator?
Maybe. I don't actually know that.
Is that like spitting in their igloo?
They actually don't like the igloo thing.
Yeah. I think that's probably more of like the native. I don't know. You live there, you know better. Anyway, yeah, that's crazy. I had there's so many things. A generator, a snow machine. You can't say igloo. Like, igloo's just a fort made out of snow.
Yeah.
Why would you get upset about that?
Apparently because it's, they never actually made those. And they're so affiliated with their nativism. And they hate it, like people all over the world like think that that's what they live in. And they're like, no, we build structures. like houses.
do
We
they-
don't need to make fucking ice houses.
Do they get like upset if you mention like the Northern Lights or something to them too? No talking about snowmen. I don't
So-
want to hear it.
So when you bring up the Northern Lights to them, they kind of roll their eyes because they're like, "Oh, you're a tourist," because they've lived with Northern Lights their whole life. It's nothing special to them. But as soon as somebody comes up, because the first guy I asked about Northern Lights, he was like, "Oh yeah, they're right there," and I look up and I can't see anything. And he's like, "Oh, you don't see it? Oh, you got to wear special glasses to see it." And finally, somebody was like, "Yeah, he's fucking with you," because they get sick of being asked about the Northern Lights. So, yeah, it's
Some
it's
angry
interesting.
people, man.
Well,
It
they're
just
so
must be cold.
they're so cold. So Eben then heads out to the electricity place to see what the hell's going on. And when he arrives, he finds the place pretty much abandoned. And during further investigation, he discovers a large patch of bloody snow, which leads him to a metal pipe sticking out of the ground with the electricity worker's head posted on top of it. So this freaks Eben out, and he jumps back in his truck and he drives through the town, telling everyone to lock their doors and load their guns. He ends up stopping to talk to a group of townspeople, informing them to go home if they have a generator, and if they don't, go to the diner.
A Jenny, man. You got to call it a Jenny.
Well, I'm going to stick with generator.
It's a Jenny.
I'll try to remember Jenny. So next we jump on over to some random towns guy whose name is John, I guess. And he's sitting at home on the couch and he's kind of worried about this electricity situation. And his wife is standing in the kitchen washing some dishes. When suddenly a vampire just like stage dives right through his window. He quickly grabs the wife, dragging her through the broken window to outside, while John grabs his gun. John then runs outside to where this window is, but he finds the vampire has drugged his wife underneath the house, and this is happening extremely fast, like within seconds. Before John can shoot the vamp, he gets slashed across the face and the gun gets knocked out of his hand. He then grabs his wife's hands as she screams for his help, but we then see her bloody body pulled from John's grip as she disappears into the darkness screaming.
Yeah, this is another one of those scenes where it's like the camera's flipping around so much, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. Like at one point, the vampire's literally like a center snap in a football. He just slides her like through under another trailer. And I was like, what's going on here?
Vampire magic. Meanwhile, back at the station, the stranger is able to talk some shit and trick Eben's brother into coming over to the cell, where he grabs him by the neck, holding him hostage. But before things get too carried away, we hear a gunshot and see blood splatter onto the cell wall. As the stranger yells in pain and releases Jake, we then see that it was Eben who walked in and shot the man. And as he opens the cell door, he handcuffs the stranger to the bars and he requests a first aid kit. Eben then tries to demand info on who is doing all this, but the stranger doesn't say much except that they are all going to be dead soon. A now very frustrated Eben then decides that he and Billy will essentially go door to door through the whole town looking for the people who are doing this. And Stella tells him that she's coming along to help, leaving Grandma and Jake to watch the prisoner.
I wouldn't insist on Stella driving here. She done wrecked with only into a giant chainsaw.
Well, that giant chainsaw kind of ran the stop sign. Because she talks about
is there a stop sign there?
Yeah, and she even says, like, I had the right of way, and he's like, I'm sorry, the brakes got stuck.
All right, I take it back.
So
Beautiful Stella, she can drive.
She's too gorgeous to be making mistakes. While on the way to get Billy, Stella and Eben are attacked when a vamp runs and jumps onto the top of their police truck, and he's like trying to beat a hole into the roof of the truck when Eben then fires his gun into him. But this doesn't kill him as he looks into the sky and he lets out this like loud screeching sound. Stella then slams on the brakes, throwing the vamp onto the ground in front of them, and before he even stops rolling, Stella puts the pedal to the metal, speeding off, asking Eben what the hell that was. As they arrive in town, they discover it's dark and deserted with some of the vehicles flipped upside down and on fire. But before they can really get much further, the grandma comes over the radio crying, screaming for help. So they end up turning right back around and heading back for the station. And when they arrive, they don't find Grandma or Jake, but they do find a large amount of blood on the wall and the floor, and the stranger is still alive, still handcuffed to the cell. So obviously, it was not him who did this.
No, they wasted a lot of Grandma's blood, man.
Well, they got a lot of it, right? It's kind of a buffet.
Yeah,
It's the golden corral
one
of
thing I'm
vampires.
confused about this movie is, like, it seems like they're just killing to kill. Like, they can't possibly be hungry at a certain point in this movie. Like, you think they'd have to piss, like, every 5 minutes. Maybe they left Grandma alone because they were
Cancer blood.
No, they were getting high. They're like, we
maybe.
can't take any more of this shit weed, man.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's also, too, like, you know, she's got cancer, so maybe her blood's kind of bitter.
Maybe it's kind of bitter from the Percocet she takes for the pain.
Well, I don't know. Maybe
and they started like nodding off. They're like, "Oh, stop sucking, Grandma."
they're like putting her blood in a spoon and with a lighter on it, and just sucking it up with a syringe.
This is why they left the guy in the cell. They got too fucking high and forgot
forgot to turn him. So Eben goes to ask him like what the fuck happened, but the stranger has a much different attitude than he had before. This time around, he's pretty upset and depressed, saying they didn't take me over and over again. He then looks up at Eben and asks him to finish him off. So if the vampires aren't going to turn him like they promised, he has no reason to go on living, I guess. Eben's like, sure, I'll blow your fucking brains out with this 12 gauge, but Stella talks him out of it. Next up, we see some dark figures walking down the street, and as they walk into the moonlight, we get our first good look at these vampires, as the head vamp says we must separate the heads from the bodies, none shall be turned. So this makes a lot more sense of why the telecommunications guy, why they removed his head and put it on a stick. Because I guess in this story, if you get like scratched or you get bit or possibly killed, they have to decapitate you or you will turn into a vampire. And the head vamp, he says, I don't need any more mouths to feed.
Yeah. The head vampire, man, he looks like a low-grade scumbag lawyer or like a shady sales guy.
This guy is a really good actor and also in a lot of things.
But it's a really good shady sales guy vampire.
But I love him in this role. Like, he kills it.
Like, tell me you don't see yourself at a car lot. And this guy's trying to sell you the lemon.
He would totally talk me into like a, you know, like a really, like a, I don't know, like an envoy.
Yeah.
Those things are known to be breaking down.
The fucking vacuum cleaner sales guy knocking on your door.
Also, these vampires, man, this is what vampires should look and act like, in my opinion. They're like these animalistic demons. They don't fall in love with humans. They don't feel bad about eating people and just drink animal blood. Like, they are straight up fucking savage beasts. And they got like these sharp ass teeth like sharks. They do like these animal screeches and these growls. And they even have, and I think this is one of the coolest things, they even have their own like ancient language, which shows that they have like been around and been doing their own thing since, you know, long before the civilized age.
This is what happened to Jesus. This is how he rose.
He was killed by a vampire.
He was bit. This is how he rose.
Good point.
He came back.
He got scratched.
They've been around for a long time.
We then head on over to the diner where we have some people just kind of hanging out and taking refuge in there. We have the helicopter guy Wilson and his father who has Alzheimer's. The female pipeline worker from earlier, Denise. The guy John who had his wife pulled from his arms. Carter, who we've seen talking to Eben in the beginning of the movie. And we have some other characters who I don't know their names and they're going to die anyway. So, oh, and Jake, Eben's brother, who is still alive, but he does say that Grandma is very much dead.
You got more names than I did. Scrolling down the IMDb before I started this, I was like, oh, fuck.
Well, I had to learn a lot of their names as I was writing the episode, so yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, like you were saying, there not many of them are like main characters.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of names.
So as they're sitting around, they're like scared as fuck and they're wondering what's going on. And we then get some shots of the vampires just going house to house, like brutally killing and eating people. We see that weapons, including guns, don't really affect them at all. One thing is, like, out of all this chaos that's going on, nobody bothers to shoot any of the vampires in the head.
Yeah, that's a point I was gonna get to in a minute because one does get shot in the head with a pistol, and it looks like a fucking double barrel shotgun blew his fucking head off.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
That didn't work?
was that the first shot out of all these guns going off? Is that the first hit in the head?
I mean,
Like you would think, people put it together for zombies. Like,
that's what I was
I
going to say.
hit one in the head.
If I'm battling
dead.
vampires and they're not going to the ground from gunshots, I'm switching to zombie rules. There's
Yeah,
nothing saying you can't switch to zombie rules. A 12-gauge shotgun turning somebody's heads into, like, droplets of blood and tissue, it's got to be dead.
I feel like zombie rules follow basic human nature rules. Like that's where that comes from. Like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
somebody isn't stopping, shoot them in the fucking head.
They might be a zombie.
If you blow the brainstem out the back of the head, that's it. Even for the undead.
If you go your whole life assuming that every threat is a zombie, you won't be surprised when there are really zombies.
Exactly.
You'll be already ready to go.
It's my rule number 4 in life.
Those people who have the like zombie contamination team stickers on their Jeeps, they're ahead of the game, ahead of all of us. So yeah, pretty much the whole town gets brutally killed and eaten. There's like blood everywhere. There's tons of people like dragged into the streets and killed. We got cars on fire. We got gunshots everywhere. It's just a straight up massacre. This is one of the best scenes in the movie, in my opinion, and it has a fucking awesome overhead shot. They literally had the camera overhead pointed down at the town. They're just kind of going with the main street, and you're just seeing just all this mayhem go on all at one time in one kind of steady shot. And I think that's a really cool shot of the movie.
I agree. I think it's one of the best shots of the movie. I also think the choreography that had to go into that, it's impressive.
Yeah, it's a lot of extras down there, probably like 100.
Yeah, and you know whenever they're firing off like blank on set, how much like regulation and stuff that goes with that and practice and making sure everything's clear, and unless you're that guy who shot that other guy.
Are you talking about Alec Baldwin?
Unless you're Alec Baldwin.
He shot a woman.
Oh.
No, he shot a guy too, but it went through the woman and into the guy. But the woman died. Yeah, the camera operator.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin will sue us now, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're done.
Because I think he was found not
Not
liable.
he presumably shot somebody.
Allegedly.
Well, actually, so apparently it was the person who was supposed to be doing all this regulating on scene, like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It was really her fault of why this happened.
The
Please
armorer.
don't sue us.
So Eben and Stella run into the diner to hide from the vamps while they basically kill everybody else. And when they get inside, Eben is reunited with his brother, who he thought was dead. The others then try to ask him who the hell these people are and what's going on. He doesn't fucking know, but he says, we can figure that out later, but first we need to find a place to hide. And the pipeline girl speaks up by saying a man named Charlie Kelso, who was one of the people who boarded up his house and left town earlier today, has a secret attic that she knows about. And I'm guessing she has been around town.
She is in on those threesomes.
So Eben,
That's a sex addict.
So Eben's like, sounds good to me. And he instructs Carter to sneak everyone over to Charlie's house while he and Stella go grab a truck and load it up with bear traps and flares. And they will meet them in the secret sex attic later. So they take off and they're hauling ass through the streets of Barrow when suddenly they come to a stop. Stella is confused to what is going on here as she continues to push the gas pedal, but the truck's tires are just spinning. We then see that a bunch of these vamps have picked up the back of the truck and are attempting to flip it upside down. As this is happening, another vamp bursts through the driver door window and attempts to pull Stella out. Eben starts shooting with his gun. The vamps end up flipping the car over with Eben and Stella still inside. And right as it looks like the end of the road for these two, a fucking snowplow comes speeding past, running over like 4 or 5 vamps. And it is then revealed that the driver of this truck is Bo Brower, who we seen Eben give the ticket to earlier.
Bobby came in clutch with that snowplow.
He came here to plow some snow and kick some ass, and he's all out of snow.
That I heard that's his new motorcycle club's whole motto.
Yeah. Eben and Stella then run and jump into the plow as Bo speeds off, and the remaining vamps just kind of give up and they go back to killing the easier targets. So Eben and Stella and Bo head on over to Charlie's house where the rest of the gang is hiding upstairs in the Love Shack. And now that the gang is all together, they really have no choice but to listen to the rest of the town being slaughtered while they just wait it out. We then jump back on over to the station where the stranger is still cuffed to the cell when suddenly the main vamp shows up to talk with him. And he is stoked because he thinks that this is finally it. He is finally going to get his shot at being the undead, or so he thinks, because after the head vamp puts on the show, like he's finally going to turn him in appreciation for doing everything he's done, he really just snaps his neck and comments how dumb us humans are because we believe anything we are told, which he's not wrong in some sense.
Yeah, this guy is such a fucking, fanboy.
He's the Renfield. I mean, yeah,
he-
that's kind of what he is. So next we get some scenes of the group hiding out in the attic, and we see a couple important things here. The group is mostly just sitting around talking quietly amongst each other. We see that Wilson's dad keeps getting confused about where they are and he attempts to leave, but luckily the members of the group are able to stop him and kind of calm him down. We also find out that the source of Eben and Stella's breakup was actually because Stella really wanted children and Eben definitely did not. The vamps have now started searching house to house for any survivors, and the group is starting to run low on supplies. So this prompts a debate on what to do next. So Eben proposes the idea that when they get some cover and a chance to leave without detection, they should head to the store, grab what they can, and then head over to the Utilitor, which because of its large generator still has power, and they would be able to survive there the next month until the sun comes up, and everyone agrees with this plan. Unfortunately, though, the chance for some snow cover in order to get to the store without being seen doesn't happen for 7 days. So we have now jumped to day 7. And on this day, we see something interesting and probably one of the most well-known scenes of this movie.
Love it.
This is good. So we start off by seeing a very injured young woman walking right down the middle of the road, yelling for help. Eben and the gang hear this from the attic, and Carter immediately says that they need to go help her. But as Eben and Stella look out of the small attic window, they see vampires following her quietly up above on the rooftops. And this is where Eben realizes that they are using this girl for bait.
Yeah. As much as I hate the camera work in this parts of this movie, the camera work on this was great. Man, with the her in focus and then the vampires creeping across the roof in the background.
Yeah.
Coolest shot of the movie.
So once she reaches the end of the street, she comes face to face with a group of vampires where we see the head honcho walk over towards her. The girl then begins to cry, informing Count Chocula that she is tried, but there is no one left to kill. But she can see that he's not pleased that she wasn't able to DoorDash him some human flesh, and she begins to sob while she says, "Oh, please God." The Count, with his long sharp nails caked in blood and bits of dark red dried on his face, leans in real close and in his broken English says God, as he then looks up to the sky, almost as if he is looking for God to appear out of nowhere and save this girl. After a brief moment of God not showing up, he then looks back at the girl and he says, "No God." He then suddenly gets up and walks off, leaving her to his vamp girlfriend and his best bro to eat.
Already trying to sell her the idea of atheism.
Yeah, he was.
Told you, man, he's a sales guy.
We then cut to Eben, who is attempting to make a run for it while the vamps are distracted, but he then gets distracted when a fellow townsperson calls to him from under a house. Despite his better judgment, Eben decides to try and save him, but once he pulls him from under the house, Eben realizes that this guy has been turned into a vamp and he's looking for a meal. Eben tries to resist killing him at first, but quickly realizes that he has to after the guy repeatedly comes after him. Eben ends up chopping his head off with an axe. I do really like this decapitation for how realistic it is. We don't get to see much, but it does take Eben 5 or 6 really hard swings to get his head completely off. And I like that realism that they add into this kill.
Yeah, I thought the first hit we actually get to see, I thought it looked good.
Yeah.
And then I was so let down that there's 5 more hits, and I thought that was a really good chance to add some cool practical effects, and they missed it.
Yeah, I wish we could have seen it. We do see a really awesome thing like that later, but I do like how it wasn't, standard movie. He swings the axe once and the guy's head fucking sails off without an issue.
Yeah, this scumbag lawyer vampire's well, goddamn, John, we let you turn, and you die in the first hour. We gave you literally eternal life, and you made it 20 minutes.
Yeah, his vampire, your vampire, you can live forever, and he didn't make it an hour. It's not a good vampire.
Yeah, it's awful.
So after this encounter, a very winded Eben says, fuck the store, and immediately heads back to the hideout, where he is greeted by Stella and Bo. He then lays on the floor, barely able to breathe, and when Stella asks about his inhaler, he informs her that he has lost it. So Eben, not in good shape right now. So after this happens, Eben passes out along with just about everybody else, leaving Stella up on guard. And everything seems to be going pretty quiet until Wilson's father wakes up and decides that he is going to walk all the way to the next town. That's not going to happen.
Oh, not just the next town. The next town is 80 miles away. And that is totally some old man shit to say. Oh, get out of my way. I'm just going to walk 80 miles in the dark, freezing cold with no food.
Yeah, I mean, even there wasn't vampires.
We did this to get to school when I was your age.
Even without the vampires, you're not going to make it. So Wilson and Stella chase him downstairs and attempts to stop him, but he's not having it. He pretends like he needs to use the bathroom, but then he escapes out of the window. Wilson freaks out and tries to go after him, but Stella tries to pull him back because, they're man-eating vampires outside. But Wilson doesn't shy away from straight-up assault as he hits Stella in the face and dashes out of the front door.
Bro,
Get off me, bitch.
He hit this woman.
This beautiful
so
goddess.
Hard. Dude, she hits her fucking head on the way down. She got knocked the fuck out, man. She definitely took one to the head there.
So Eben is thankfully able to come downstairs and pull Stella to the side just in time to hide from Crazy Eyes Vampire, which is what I named him. He comes into the house after hearing this commotion. And by the way, Crazy Eyes, he eats people like your toddler eats birthday cake. His mouth, chin, neck is constantly drenched in blood.
He looks like these vampires were people prior to being turned, and he was one not right looking dude. There may have been some type of something going on. Maybe somebody had a child and they had special needs defects, and they were like, whoa, if we turn him into a vampire,
it might work.
He'll be normal.
It might work.
He'll be healthy. He'll live forever. All the other vampires kind of, some of their faces are a little misshapen, but this guy is ugly as fuck. I'd be more scared of looking at him than getting eaten by him.
Well, for some reason, he gets more blood on him than he drinks. He's the only one that's completely soaked in blood all the time.
Because he's special.
You ever heard of a fucking napkin?
Bro, they put him at a high chair when it's feeding time.
Can you imagine?
It's like an adult-sized high chair. They put him up there. They got They got to put a bib on them. It's
Can
like
you-
a goth bib.
Can you imagine, like, they bite the neck and then they just stick a little straw in the neck and they just kind of very cleanly and nicely just suck the blood through a straw?
His is one of those like Capri Sun.
Capri Sun straw?
Yeah.
Oh,
they gotta
no, the
give him
pouch?
kid one. Yeah.
Where it squeezes and it just goes
They
everywhere.
they take the heart out and give him this little straw to poke in there.
So anyway, right before Crazy Eyes finds Eben and Stella hiding in the hallway, he gets distracted by the sounds of Wilson outside yelling for his dad. And we assume that's the end of Wilson and Wilson's dad. So after this, the gang gets a little luck on their side as Eben looks out the window and finds that it is a fucking blizzard out there. So it is now time to make their move. And this shit totally works. They are able to walk right down the middle of the street without even being seen. Or maybe the vamps just didn't go after them because they don't like their food freezer burnt.
I'm surprised the vampires at this point, as long as they have been around, they don't have like a doctor that they've turned, like somebody that's trying to stock up on all this wasted blood. Like, we got enough blood to make it the next year.
You soak it up in a sponge and squeeze the sponge out into like a bucket.
No, man, they tap a catheter in. They straight up catheter you, drain all your blood out, store it.
They're
Capri
too
Sun
savage for
pouches.
this. They're like
Yeah.
bears, but like the humans.
That's the one thing I don't like about the vampires in this movie is it doesn't seem like they drink blood to survive.
Oh,
it seems like
I think part of
they're-
it's just the killing, man. Like that's their entertainment. They don't watch TV.
yeah, and normal vampires, like even if they like the killing, they have this need, this inherent need to suck blood to survive. And if they don't get the blood, it weakens them. But these motherfuckers are like, I'm surprised they didn't show up with guns.
I really I like that aspect of it. I like the fact that they're in it for, they're in it for food, but they're also in it for sport.
And you notice, like, everybody who turns into a vampire isn't, like, in the crew. This is like a
Yeah.
vampire gang.
Yeah, that's why, I called it like an ancient vampire cult at the beginning because that's kind of really what it seems like.
You think they rock, like, black bandanas and shit?
Yeah, they're probably like the Crips of the vampire world. I could see that.
They're the goths. They're the vamp
The
kids.
goth Crips.
The V-pyre.
You know they do the blood thing with their hands. For sure. So they arrive at the store and they all kind of split up. They're looking for food, propane, batteries, and medical supplies. And this seems to be going well until it is revealed that there is a little girl vampire and they are eating the person's neck. So the tiny vamp ends up charging at the group, which, by the way, I think that this is a really well put together scene because they go and they tell Eben, who's got the axe, about the vampire in the back. But they don't tell him that it is a kid vampire. So when he walks over to this doorway, he's got the axe. He's got it like cocked back. He's ready to go. And this little girl, she comes like charging at him out of the shadows. And he's expecting like an adult-sized vampire. So when he gets kind of jump scared by this, he just swings the axe. And he totally fucking misses her because she's a kid. She's short and he swings it like you would hit an adult. And I really love that kind of realistic detail in such a very short scene.
Yeah, I do feel like if you're gonna tell somebody that there's a vampire, that would be the first thing. Like, hey, there's a little kid vampire in here. Like, how do you miss that part?
Yeah, that's, you need to know that
We
info.
got fucking Abigail in here chewing on fucking John's arm.
This is the OG Abigail. So he swings and he misses and he falls to the floor. And Child Vamp then runs past him, tackling Carter to the ground. She then uses her claws to grab at his face and hold him still so she can like bite him. He does manage to kind of throw her off before he gets bitten though, which, by the way, seen something cool here, but we're going to come back to that later. So Carter throws her off and Eben, Bo, and Stella grab her and they like pin her against the wall. And they're yelling at the other two to grab this axe and chop her head off. But they're scared little bitches, like they don't move. When suddenly out of nowhere, 15-year-old Jake swoops in with the wind, swinging the axe and chopping the little girl's head clean off. So
he's a kid too.
he's
Doesn't
kid.
feel as bad.
Killing your own.
I'm a kid killer. Better you than me.
So after this, everybody's all shook up. Carter's in the corner trying to get his bearings back. And the waitress lady looks out the window only to find that they are now stuck in this store because the blizzard has stopped. So we are then informed that it's day 18, and the group realizes that they really need to move from this location. Carter asks if he were to create a distraction, if they would be able to make it to the sheriff's station. And before he can answer, Stella brings up the fact that these creatures can't survive in the sun. Now, one thing I do want to bring up, why would they go back to the station? Because we've already seen people held up in the station and they got pretty easily killed. At least one of them got easily killed in the sheriff's station. Like, seems like once that happened, don't go back there. Like, that's not a good hold up spot.
Grandma got turned into a fucking milkshake in here. This probably isn't keeping much out. And they don't really elaborate why.
Yeah.
Like, you would think if they were like, okay, we have a stash of ammo and weapons in here that we can shoot them in the head with, why this wasn't the plan early on. Because it's Alaska, there's a ton of guns and ammo in this town. There's 10 main vampires in the vamp crew. We got 30 days. Literally, if we hit one in the head every day, we can get out of here in 10 days.
It's good. It's good survival math. So anyway, they can't, they assume they can't survive the sun.
Stella wants to bring the sun early, which, if she said it like that, I would have totally rolled my fucking eyes.
Yeah, so they can't survive in the sun. So what they want to do is she wants to go to Eben and Jake's grandma's house where she's growing this weed. And she wants to use the grow lights on the vampires. So Stella's like, I'm gonna do it. Like, I'm gonna make the run to the house and you guys go to the sheriff's station. But Eben's he's not having this. He actually volunteers himself for the mission, even though he doesn't even believe that this idea is going to work. So Eben ends up running out there and he gets their attention. And of course, they immediately start chasing after him. And while this is going on, we see the rest of the group sneak out of the store and start heading towards the sheriff's station. Before Eben can use the UV lights, though, he first has to start his grandmother's Jenny. There we go.
Did they say they were UV lights?
Yeah, they did.
They're really HID lights in the movie.
It was Jake said that she was using UV lights to grow it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it puts off UV light. I probably should have said that better. So yeah, I mean HID lights do let off UV, but this is an awful plan. The lights would have to be so fucking big. I know 1,000 watt high pressure sodium lets out 150,000 lumens, which is good, except after a foot, the fall off is so dramatic. This wouldn't do anything within, I'd say, 2 or 3 feet. And the light that he grabs is actually probably no bigger than a 600, probably a 400 watt metal halide. The shit wouldn't have burned even the baby skin on a vampire.
Well, it's a movie light and it worked.
It did.
So you're wrong. But yeah, so he's got to start this generator, which is located outside in a little shed next to the house. And despite it taking a few pulls, he manages to get it going just in time. Right as the vamps, they catch up to him, he runs inside the house, closing the door behind him. The vampires kind of just stop at the door and they're waiting for the head vamp, Marlowe, to give them the go-ahead. Marlowe's vamp queen is very eager to run in after Eben. Marlowe's kind of a bit hesitant to give her the go-ahead at first. And after thinking about it for a moment, he gives her the go-ahead and she rushes into the house. But little does she know, Eben is already set, holding the UV light down towards the ground, waiting for them to bust into the door. And when this Draculite bitch does, it is glorious, because Eben flips the light right up at her, and she immediately turns a nice shade of crispy black everywhere the light hit her body. She screams and screeches in pain as she falls right back out the door she ran into, landing in Marlowe's arms as he looks at her burned body in disbelief. The rest of the vampires quickly realize what just happened, and they go and they shut this generator off, leaving Eben's light now useless, but it is okay because he manages to escape out of the back door. As Eben is running away from the area, trying to get back to the station, he is talking to Stella on the radio. Bo then takes the walkie from Stella, informing Eben to run towards Rogers Avenue because he's got a plan. We then cut back to burnt Betty, who is still screaming in pain from the UV light. Marlowe walks over and attempts to comfort her some, and he then basically tells her in his vampire language that he's got to kill her now, to which she says that she understands. He then covers her eyes and straight up bites a fucking chunk out of her throat.
Yeah, he looks pissed. Apparently, he's never seen like
that's his woman.
A light that replicated the sun before.
You burnt my woman.
He looks like his mind is blown.
Yeah.
It's like 2,000 years ago, we didn't have this shit.
They've harnessed the sun in a tiny metal box.
I can tell you if, fuck, what the fuck is his name?
Eben?
I can tell you if I'm Eben and this shit just happened to work this good, I'm taking that light back with me.
Well,
I don't care if we got to figure a way to wire it to the damn car.
Well, I was thinking if you had, like, if you took the plow and you put a generator in the back of the plow and then you had like 7, 8 lights, beaming off of the truck, they wouldn't even be able to get to the truck to stop the generator. Like, you basically have, a vehicle that they couldn't even come close to.
Yeah. I mean, and not only could they not come close to it, that shit ended up killing her. And he was a pretty good distance away. So they wouldn't be able to even come. They would have to hide. They would have to go inside and hide.
They would be hiding in the sex addict.
What a change of movie.
Yeah.
They're vampires, though, so I'm sure there'd be lots of sex going on.
30 Days a Night, Eben's Revenge. We then jump back over to Bo, who is now driving that big plow thing with the chainsaw on the front. Which, as soon as I seen this thing in the beginning of the movie where it runs into Stella's truck, I knew that they were going to use this thing to kill some vampires at some point.
Same.
It's too awesome looking not to.
I'm like, I don't know if this thing really exists in real life, but if you're going to put this in a movie,
yeah,
you have to use it.
I want to see this in an Evil Dead movie.
Yes, you have a literally, I don't know, probably 3,000-pound chainsaw. That's
It's
just
huge.
a chainsaw part. That's not the vehicle that carries it.
Yeah.
Like you gotta kill some vampires with this thing.
But yeah, Bo is just like running these motherfuckers down with this thing. Even at one point, he is driving down the street with like this vamp just stuck to the front of it. And it's like the chainsaw's just like ripping his guts out and he's just stuck on it. It's great. The only problem is there isn't really anything protecting the back. And the vamps are starting to, grab onto the back. But our man Bo has kind of thought of that already because he has placed some bear traps back there. And one of the vampires, he jumps up there and he gets his foot caught in the trap and he like falls off. And it's got like this 10, 15 foot chain. And Bo's just like dragging his fucking ass down the street. And he's also like running over other vampires with it. Like this thing is like a vampire fucking slaughterer. And he starts using his fucking shotgun, like he's fucking laying into him with this 12 gauge. He is a one-man vamp killing machine.
I wish they would have had this in the Dawn of the Dead remake when they leave the mall.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine this giant chainsaw
just leading the way.
Through. Yeah.
So Bo ends up purposely running the plow into the front of the hotel, jumping out holding his shotgun and a fuck ton of flares. This big crowd of vamps then gather around the front of the building, with some of them attempting to get in, and the first one to try and face off with badass Bo is, of course, Crazy Eyes. Bo quickly realizes his 12 gauge is out of ammo, but he's not going to let them take him down so easily, as they begin to enter the building and approach him. He then lights 2 of the flares, tells them they aren't going to eat him, and he drops them in the box, causing this huge explosion. Bo's very injured body goes flying out of the building into the road, along with a bunch of on-fire vampires. Marlowe walks over to him as he attempts to crawl away. He then puts his boot on the back of Bo's neck and says, "When man meets something he can't destroy, he destroys himself instead," which, pretty accurate.
That's a good line.
Yeah.
Weak kill, really awesome line.
Yep.
Poor fucking Bobby here. That explosion was so fucking big. I would hope I would at least be unconscious for my killing.
He lived through it and he's awake.
He's just burnt up now.
He
and,
just
like,
blew his
suffering.
legs off
Yeah.
or something because the only thing he can't do is walk.
I think he lost his legs in SOA too. So maybe
Yeah.
that's just a thing of his.
I haven't seen that in a very long time.
I think he has to ride one of those little side carts after that.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm giving up
unfortunate.
on my motorcycle days if I get to that point.
Yep, me too. Unfortunately, though, he then crushes Bo's skull, and that is the end of Badass Bo, the vampire killer. So after all that, Eben finally makes it back to the station, where we see that the group is now whittled down to Eben, Stella, the waitress lady, Jake, and Carter. But just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, Carter informs them that the group is about to get even smaller as he turns around to reveal that he is now a vamp. So when the little girl jumped on him in the store, she scratched his face, and this is what kicked off him slowly beginning to turn into a vampire. Now, when I was writing this scene, and of course I hit pause, and it was the scene in the grocery store, and I hit pause, and I paused it on the perfect spot where I noticed that you can actually see this event take place. And I'd never noticed it before because it's so fast. But let's see, where is the picture? Oh, here. Is it this it? Yeah, so you see when he gets bit, all these veins that pop out. Those are like the vampire stuff running through his veins.
Oh shit.
That's in the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look close, you can definitely see, I guess, the veins turning black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so quick, but yeah, that's that scratch right there on his face is you can see like the vampire blood spreading from that scratch. And
did they just miss the scratch on his face?
Oh, he actually when I watched it the second time I looked, he puts his hood up, and he's like sitting in the corner with his hood up, and he has his hood up pretty much this whole time until right now in this scene where he pulls his hood back, reveal he's vampire.
I like this guy, but I feel like it was kind of irresponsible to not tell anybody for that long.
Well, I'm about to talk about, mention why he doesn't tell people, which I mean, it sucks for the group, but I kind of get it. So he then explains that the reason he didn't say anything sooner was because he was trying to wait until they got to the utilidor so he could see that photo of his family one last time. Now, you remember earlier, Evan asked him about his wife and kids coming to Barrow in the beginning of the film, and he said, and then I said, this would come back. So yeah, he then tells them that a year ago, his wife and kids were killed by a drunk driver in a car accident, and he just didn't tell anybody. And so nobody in this whole entire town knew that his family died a year before. And it sucks, man. He pretty much went through that whole grieving, terrible process by himself, probably still going to work every day and pretending like his family was fine.
Yeah, it's really sad. And
It's very
like,
sad.
If I was in his shoes, man, and I lived in a secluded place like this where nobody would know unless you told somebody, I don't know if it's something that I could talk about.
Yeah,
Want
it's
people
bad spot.
asking about. Yeah, it's really sad. Also, he talks about how he wanted to kill himself and stuff,
Yeah.
and he just couldn't bring himself to do it, but essentially, you have to kill me because I can't live forever. I want to be with my kids. And I'm like, God damn, that is some heartfelt shit. That is the most heartfelt, convincing way of convincing a friend to kill you.
Yeah, it's interesting because his main concern for getting killed is not like, oh, I don't want to be a vampire. I don't want to eat people. It's like, I want to see my family. Like, I actually can't wait to die. I wanted to die this whole year.
Yeah.
And now I'm cursed with this. I'm going to live forever. I'm never going to die. And, that's really the worst case scenario for somebody in his situation.
Yeah, I mean, how, like, poetically fucked up is
Yeah.
that? Like, you want to off yourself, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. And then you get cursed with becoming immortal and can't die.
Yeah.
So you can't be with your family. I would be like, man, I don't care how good of a friend I was. Like, I would be like, okay, man, I'll kill you. I'll do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You convinced me there.
Yeah, I agree. I would do the same thing Eben does. So later on, after Carter's death, Eben discovers his deputy Billy is still alive after seeing him signal with a flashlight through a window. Him and Stella then rush over to help, but when they arrive, they find that Billy is pretty badly injured and he has murdered his whole family, which greatly upsets Eben. So they end up carrying Billy over to the station, but when they arrive, they find that everyone else is gone, and they didn't even leave a note, assholes. So Eben and Stella assume that they all went to the utilidor for safety, and they drag Billy's ass back out into the wind and the snow, heading in that direction. But as they take a moment to scope out the area, Stella sees a kid drenched in blood walking down the street and runs off to grab him. A vampire that looks like Marilyn Manson walks out and spots Stella. Eben tells her to run for the utilidor while he attempts to kill this Jesus Christ superstar, and Billy just gets scared and runs off, leaving everybody. Eben manages to escape and sneak his way into the utilidor where he finds Denise, Jake, and the waitress lady, but no Stella. We also see Billy arrive at the utilidor with crazy eyes lurking behind him. So head honcho Marlowe calls a meeting of the Fangs and tells everyone that for centuries they have managed to make humans believe vampires are fantasy and not real, so they must kill everyone and burn the whole place down, so the real story of what happened here can never be known, and humans will continue to not believe in their existence. They then bust a hole in the Alaskan pipeline, causing flammable oil to begin pouring all through the town. We then jump back on over to Eben, who radios Stella. Turns out she and the kid she rescued are hiding under a car in the street, pretty much stranded at this point. Next, Billy makes his way inside the utilidor only to immediately get attacked by Crazy Eyes. But the gang hears this go down and Eben runs to his rescue with the axe. Crazy Eyes isn't having any of that shit though, taking the axe from him and hitting Billy in the throat with it. The whole gang begins fighting with the vamp, buying Eben some time to get himself back together, but it's no use because Crazy Eyes starts beating Eben's ass again. Billy finally sums up the courage to actually be helpful, even though he is bleeding to death from his vamp bite and his axe to the neck wound. He jumps up and does a full speed shoulder check into Crazy Eyes, sending him flying into the giant shredder we seen in the beginning of the movie. Unfortunately for old Billy though, his hand gets cut off by the blades and now he is really bleeding to death, and the hand cut looks really good. Amazing work here. Billy begins freaking out as his neck and hand erupt blood like a pissed off volcano. Eben tries to help him, but Billy pushes him away, telling him to go, and it is at this point the group realizes that Billy is actively turning into a vamp. Eben then picks up the axe, knowing what he must do to spare his friend from turning into a bloodaholic. He raises the axe back, and he gives it a full swing right into Billy's neck, and I fucking love this scene. It takes 3 good chops, and we see them all close up.
Thank the good fucking Lord, we finally got some good practical effects in this movie. It only takes about an hour and 45 minutes.
It's a good one too, man.
We do, and what bothered me is this was like proof that they had a good practical effect team. We know, especially with the way things have gone now, that practical effects don't really cost that much. Like using CGI used to be an excuse, but I mean, we've had movies made on $30,000 to have the best practical effects you've ever seen, So they had the budget, they had the talent there. It bums me out that they didn't utilize that more. But movie's also a product of the rise of CGI being in horror.
Yeah, back then, even when it made sense to use practical, it was like the popular thing. It was almost like if your movie didn't have CGI in it, like people looked down on it or something. The way they used it at that time, like
It
it
was
was
very,
just
very lazy too. It was
Mhm.
like, well, this is what everybody else is doing. People seem to either like it or don't mind it because they're still watching these movies. So why bother going through having somebody make this practical effect and it being a whole day shoot just trying to get this 10 seconds shot when we can just CGI it?
So, after all this, Eben goes back to figuring out how to save Stella. We find out that this is the last day of night and the sun will finally rise and borrow tomorrow. But unfortunately, Stella can't just wait the vamps out because her and the kid have begun to freeze to death. So basically, even though they are right at the finish line, they're going to have to go up against like 20 vamps just to save Stella and this kid. Evan sends one last message to Stella telling her the sun will rise tomorrow and promises that they will watch it together. She then tells him that she loves him and she should have never left him in the first place. They then say their goodbyes for now and they turn off the walkies. Now that the streets have mostly filled with oil, the vamps set it on fire and we see it pretty much burning down the whole town. The worst part about this situation is the hot burning oil is heading right towards Stella, who is still hiding under this car and can't escape without being attacked by vampires. So Evan's got to come up with a game plan very quickly here. So after realizing that if he doesn't act fast, Stella is either going to burn to death or be ripped to shreds by vampires. So he jumps up and he runs into the main room where he grabs some medical supplies and heads over to Billy's now dead body. He then takes out a syringe, filling it with some of Billy's now infected vampire blood. Jake sees this and tries to stop him, but Evan's not hearing it, cutting him off only to tell him that when all the vamps run towards him, to use the radio to tell Stella to escape the building, or escape to the building. Jake, in his confusion and panic, asks Evan what he is doing, and Evan explains that when the others turned, even though they became a vampire, they still maintained their own personality for a while. Evan is going to use Billy's infected blood to turn himself, gaining the power of the vampires, but staying himself at least long enough to fight them and save Stella. He then hugs his little brother Jake and tells him to please take care of Stella for him, and before Jake can even respond, Evan injects the blood into his arms, causing an immediate reaction. Evan then jerks and screams in pain as we see his eyes turn solid black and his teeth become very sharp. After a moment, Evan calms back down, informing the others he can now smell their blood. He then puts his coat back on and marches out towards Marlowe and the gang, and I noticed the mistake here. When Marlowe sees Evan walking up, knowing he's like ready to throw down, Marlowe tells like the rest of the vamps to get back, kind of let him take care of Evan. To his immediate left is Crazy Eyes, who we just seen get turned into chicken nuggets in the grinder. He's in the total end of the movie. That's weird.
Yeah. Maybe there was two. Maybe they were
Twins?
special twins.
Maybe. So before Marlowe can realize Evan is a vamp, Evan hits him with the 1-2 punch, putting Marlowe on his ass and totally taking him by surprise. But he quickly jumps up and begins throwing down as him and Evan trade shots. Marlowe pretty quickly gains the upper hand here, and he begins slamming Evan on a car a bunch of times, throwing him to the ground and even kicking him in the face so hard, Evan does a full 360 spin in the snow. Marlowe then grabs Evan's head, pulling his lips back, revealing that he now has vampire teeth, and the realization that Evan has been turned seems to piss Marlowe off even more than before. Evan is then able to land a couple good shots on Marlowe before Marlowe grabs his hand and snaps his wrist backwards, causing Evan to fall to his knees and scream in pain. Marlowe then backhands him to the ground and kind of does like this victory walk as the other vamps screech real loud in celebration. Marlowe then dives like 15 feet towards Evan to finish him off, but Evan throws his hand out, putting it right through Marlowe's mouth and straight out of the back of his head, killing him. Marlowe falls to his knees while deep-throating Eben's arm, and as Eben rips his hand from Marlowe's bloody skull, the rest of the vamps stand in shock. As Eben stands there waiting on the next challenger, the rest of the vampires kind of just growl and walk off like fuck this, as the camera pans up to the sky revealing the sun will be coming up soon. We then see a very much alive Stella walk up to Eben, realizing he is now a vampire as she asks him what he has done, and he responds, "What I had to do." He then asks if he should go after the others, but she says no, very much still in shock. He then mentions it's almost dawn anyway, and she kind of snaps out of it, realizing that he is going to die when the sun comes up. We then cut to him and Stella, who are sitting on a large snowbank by the ocean, watching the sun come up. She lays her head on his shoulders as he holds her close, knowing at any minute now he is going to die. They then start to cry as Eben reveals that even though they were split up, he still wore his wedding ring around his neck because he never stopped loving her. They then share a kiss before Eben starts to turn to ash. She holds him close as we begin to see his skin turn black and gray. Little pieces of ash then begin to blow away as we see Stella's grip on Eben's coat become less and less until Eben is mostly no more. And that is the end of 30 Days of Night.
Man, you know I love a grim ending, but I got some serious issues with this ending. For one, if he was gonna sacrifice himself to distract him to save her, why didn't he just do it as a person? Like, why?
Because he wasn't strong enough to fight Marlowe. He wouldn't be as a person.
But it wouldn't have mattered. All she needed was a distraction. That's it. A distraction to run out of there. But that's not my main issue. The punch through Marlowe's fucking skull. Why didn't Marlowe just do that? If they have like such power, they can punch through the back of somebody's head. Why did they have a whole fight scene? Like,
because it's a movie.
And the punch through the head was so fast. I was like confused at what happened at first. They CGI'd it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, when they zoom back, it almost looks like, I guess because the angle, that his arm is missing. So I'm like, did he like cut his arm off and impale him with it? But then on rewind, it's just they do it so fast.
Yeah, because it's
CGI, really
yeah.
bad CGI. But the worst part to me is the fact that the car that she is laying under is right fucking by where they're fighting, right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And it never gets engulfed with fire.
Because it's protected by plot.
Yeah, so she essentially could have just she could have just stayed there. She wouldn't have burned alive. She could have just stayed there. She would have been fine. The sun comes up literally like right after all this happens.
Yeah, it comes up like 10 minutes later.
So, I mean, she could have just stayed there. They would have rolled out probably like 10 minutes later, and he essentially kills himself to save her, and now she's going to be fucking like depressed her whole life. I just thought, like, God, if you're going to try to come up with a plan, come up with something better than that. Why didn't he just distract them from far away and let them come after him?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would have did things different. Like, I would have tried to do the truck with the lights and the generator in the back or something. But
anything.
I mean, it's just how the
I would
movie was written.
Walked
I guess.
out and fucking pulled out my ass and mooned them before I did this plan. I think it would have been not as poetic, but I feel like the
Makes
writers
for a good story.
The writers really wanted him to sacrifice himself for her, and that's fine. That would have been all right. I wouldn't have been bothered by that. But the whole like shooting himself up as a vampire, which could have backfired. He could have turned into a vampire fucking immediately.
Or it could have took longer.
Could have taken a long time. Could have taken days like Carter. Could have been instantly like Billy. There's so many different ways this could have went wrong. Yeah, I thought that the ending was just really kind of too many plot holes around it.
So, the sounds of the vampires were created through a mix of screams of the actors with recordings of local death metal singers and various marsupials. The signature roar of the vampires were the actors screaming while inhaling. It's interesting.
Huh.
The snow used in the film was not actual snow. Most of it was salt, and some of the snow was edited in to make it look real. It's a lot of fucking salt. That is a lot of fucking salt.
A lot of salt.
All right, so this one is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning. There are a number of similarities to the Stephen King story, Salem's Lot. Both stories center on a small town whose citizens are killed by vampires and the small group who fights back. Salem's Lot's head vampire is named Barlow. 30 Days of Night's head vampire is named Marlowe.
Wow.
The stranger, the human servant of Marlowe, prepares the town for the arrival of the vampires, just as Stryker prepared Salem's Lot for Barlow.
How did I not catch that?
I told you. Like, I didn't even catch it, and I've read this shit multiple times, seen every adaptation of this, and yeah. The town burns down in the end, just like Salem's Lot. One half of a romantic couple is turned into a vampire, Susan in Salem's Lot and Eben in 30 Days of Night. And both head vampires are killed while the other remaining vampires escape. A lot of similarities to Salem's Lot.
That sounds like a stolen story to me.
Yeah, so what I was saying though is, like, we were talking about at the beginning how this movie does have kind of some unique stuff, and then I said, well, I came across something that when I found it, I was like, it's not as unique as I actually thought.
See, that's the problem sometimes with there being multiple rewrites of somebody's script. That can be really good and it can be beneficial. Good things can get added. But I would really like to know what the original story was, because I feel like when you have that happen, if it goes the wrong way, the original writer's vision for what he's writing gets lost. You know, you have one person, and you get these independent movies where they don't have that happen. They don't have studios step in and change things. And the movies end up a lot of times really good because somebody's creative vision got to come out and not get picked apart. I wonder if the more rewrites that happen, the more this became Salem's Lot.
Well, you could probably pretty easily find the original version of the story because, remember, it was a successful comic book first. This story comes from the comic book. So you could probably look that up. All right, so ratings and kill count. Total kills, somewhere around 150 to 170 kills. I couldn't count them. Whole fucking town gets killed. Obviously, most of these were vampire kills. We do know that 3 of the Barrow residents are killed with a hatchet by Eben. One of the vampires is thrown in a shredder, and Eben, who turned himself into a vampire, kills himself by watching the sunrise. Favorite kill? I picked, so I'm up first. Hands down, Billy getting his head chopped off by Eben. And my close second, is actually when Bo used that chainsaw plow thing to kill that one vampire.
Wow, mine's the exact same. And it wasn't even close. Billy being the best kill Billy's kill was a 9 out of 10, and everything else was 5 or 6 out of 10. Like, it wasn't even very easy to pick a best. The chainsaw one, although it was CGI,
Still awesome.
The one where the guy's getting ripped up or falls on the blade, that one's really good. But there's also a chainsaw kill where the end of the chainsaw hits one in the head.
Yeah.
So either one of those could be a number 2. But yeah, Billy by far. We never addressed either how Billy Crispin walled his fucking family. And because he didn't want them to get killed by vampires, but nobody ever mentions that the vampires never came to his house. He's still alive.
Yeah,
That's fucked up.
When I seen it, I was like, honestly, I don't know how I'd feel about rescuing Billy after, because obviously Eben, the reason he gets so upset is because he's probably known these people his whole life.
Yeah.
And, them two work together, so he probably sees them pretty regularly, especially, the wife, the wife and kids, a small town, you're both the only 2 police.
Yeah, I don't blame him. He was like, you don't hurt your family.
Yeah, this, especially coming from a guy who kind of lost his family. which it was only Stella, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta think in that situation, like, for me, I would rather die in an attempt to save my family. I would at least be the first to go than to kill them and then something like this happen.
Yeah.
Like, he literally he murders his wife and kids, and at first, when they pulled the blanket over, I'm like, "Oh, the vampires got to them." And then you find out they didn't. And then the grim reality sets in that he's still alive. They never even came to the house. And it's really never addressed.
Yeah,
I think when he killed Billy, it was kind of like he does it in a very, very like gruesome way for it being his best friend. I think he was still a little upset about that. They just didn't have time to really process it with what was going on.
All right, so it's time for rating. I gave this movie a 3.8. I I love the version of the vampires. I wish there was more vampire movies like this. I love that it takes place in Alaska. It's very snowy. It's a movie that takes place over an extended period of time instead of a 1, 2, 3 night thing. I like the cast. It has a very good cast in my opinion. I don't have any issue with any of the cast. Well, at least the main cast. There are a lot of white guys in this that the more background characters like Wilson and John. Honestly, the first time I started writing this, I actually thought Wilson and John were the same person. And then I also was confused because I thought that he was the guy that Eben finds under the house, that he's a van. And I was like, is this all the same guy? I thought it was the helicopter guy.
I thought John was the guy under the house that gets turned
Honestly,
into a vampire.
I still don't know. I don't know, but I like all the main characters, really good acting. I enjoy there's big chunks of this movie I like, which is like the town getting slaughtered and like that's awesome because not in a lot of movies you get to see pretty much a whole town get slaughtered in the matter of 5 minutes. Just pure mayhem, and I really like that. Josh Hartnett kills it. Melissa George, fantastic. Totally want to watch another movie with her in it. But yeah, man, I like this movie. It's good. I mean, I don't watch a lot of vampire movies, despite my love for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But this is a good one. I like this one.
Well, I'm not a super big vampire person. We talked about this when we talked about Nosferatu, which is probably my favorite vampire movie. I gave this a 3.2.
That's fair.
I love the premise a little less now that I know it's literally just Salem's Lot. Well, I don't know. I still like it just as much because, I mean, art imitates art. We've gotten...
I mean, Salem's Lot's a good story.
Friday the 13th, my favorite franchise, was imitating Halloween. And so on. There's plenty of movies that imitated Friday the 13th. Josh Hartnett and Melissa George killed it. I love those two. I thought they both did great.
They got good chemistry, too.
Yeah, they did. They did, especially with their, like, kind of split up but still love each other thing. I thought the vampires looked really cool. I loved the black eyes of the main one. Like, those solid black eyes. I thought that they nailed the feel of the movie with it's a very clean looking movie and it's a very dry look and it has that very like dark blue color palette and it makes the movie feel cold.
Yeah.
Kind of like The Thing does. And you're watching the movie and you feel that they're in a cold environment. With that said, I fucking hated the overuse of CGI. Like, so much of this movie was CGI'd. And I thought it was slow in parts. It can get... So when I was younger and I watched this, I had a really hard time getting into it because it was so slow. And I like slow burns, but I like slow burns when the cinematic side of it is really good. And I don't know, just some slow burns work and some don't. I just had a hard time getting into this. The biggest complaint for me was the shaky, quick flashing camera angles that I complain about. Current day paranormal films, they do this all the time. Hate it. And it really makes it hard to tell what's going on sometimes. So actually, when I was looking this up, so the director is David Slade. And his signature style is that nonstop shaky camera movements.
Well, I think that was popular in 2007.
Yeah, this is around the time that actually got really popular. And I've never been a fan of that. I think it hides a lot of sometimes bad practical effects, most of the time bad CGI stuff. They use it to cover up kills, like they only show it for a glimpse and then they flash away. And the whole build up, not only did they have the flashy camera angles, but very, very shaky camera. Apparently he's known for that. So the three movies that he is really known for, there's another vampire movie he's really known for. I think it's one you'll love. So he did Hard Candy.
That's a good movie.
He did this, 30 Days a Night, and he did Twilight.
Oh, damn.
Which when you think of
Fell
Twilight,
off.
probably a lot of fucking like flashy camera angles and CGI and shit.
I think Twilight
Yeah.
was literally the death of cool vampires.
Yeah, well, he helped kill it because
Yeah.
I don't know which one he did or if he did all of them, but I know he did a Twilight. With all that said, the ending wasn't my favorite. I thought he should have died saving her as a regular person. But, it has its downfalls, but it's a good watch. If you've never seen it, it's worth checking out. I won't say it's a great watch, but if you're a fan of vampire movies, you may really enjoy it.
I mean, honestly, too, if I'm sitting in one of these states right now that's getting just fucking pounded by snow and ice, I want to watch this because we don't have a lot of horror movies in snow. And this one, I liked it. I think it's good, and it's totally a movie. It's the same thing as we live in a hurricane place, and every time we get a big hurricane, and everyone's fucking buying shit from the store or off work that day, I want to watch Storm of the Century.
Yeah, I equate it a lot to when we go on camping trips. We always watch The Blair Witch.
Yup.
I will say I would watch this second, though, because if you're getting blasted with snow right now, watch The Thing. Because everywhere where this movie failed, when it comes to practical effects, The Thing revolutionized practical effects for the time. Some amazing practical effects. So it's so much different in that aspect, and it still has that really good snowed-in feel.
If you've got the time, watch The Thing, watch The Lodge, watch 30 Days a Night. Boom.
God, The Lodge, man, that's a good one.
Yep.
That's a good one. A lot of people probably haven't seen that one. We did an early episode on it. I forgot all about that. The Lodge, great snowed-in movie.
And they're watching The Thing while they're being snowed in the lodge.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, so that is our take on 30 Days of Night. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoy the show. Check out the website. Check out the socials. Tune in next week for In a Violent Nature. Those of you who said that you hadn't seen it yet when we put it on our top 10 list, you got a week to see it. So, where was I at? Tune in next week to hear us cover, I already said that. Tell a friend, a family member, or your local sheriff about the show. We hope to see you next time. You got any last words?
Don't get too high on grandma's blood.
God, no God.